So I will introduce now the panelists. First of all, Limo Rodenko, sitting on the left. Limo is a first-year student at Art College Berlin, belongs to the first generation of Ukrainian scholarship students in the Program for International Education and Social Change. Limo studies humanities and arts and social thought, was an LGBTQ activist in Ukraine, and is a professional artist working with music, visual art and performance. In this May, Limo performed a piece titled Red Tablegate at the Kunstwerke, tackling Ukrainian history from a post-colonial perspective. Aisha Karam left Afghanistan last year, where she studied international law at Kabul University, and after arriving here continued to study ethics and politics at Art College Berlin. She also, in addition to this Art College scholarship, holds a scholarship of the Hertha Henkel Stiftung. She was Afghan Youth Representative to the United Nations 2019, and is a regional leader of the Tertiary Refugee Students Network and International Project Assistant with Kinderberg International. She also writes and gives TED Talks, and you can find her in the internet on many occasions. We are still waiting for Amina, but I'll introduce her anyhow. She graduated last year in ethics and politics and participated in the democratic revolution in Syria already back in 2011, 12, 13, is a survivor of the Assad regime. She has been working as a journalist and activist ever since then, tirelessly campaigning for women's rights and for the disappeared, and also for children in Syria. In the last couple of years, she worked here in Berlin for Syria campaign and gave workshops on all kinds of topics. She's currently enrolled in a master program at SOAS University in London and experimenting with methods of storytelling for doing advocacy. Omar Haidari graduated last year in ethics and politics and studied, before he came to Germany, law at Kabul University. He now works as the public relation and activist network lead for an NGO providing support on the ground in Afghanistan called Asil, and he also works as an event organizer with WAFO, the Association of Afghan Organizations in Germany. He's also been a well-known figure on social media with tens of thousands of followers, I believe, commenting on what's happening in Afghanistan, with an outreach that allowed him last year, before and after the fall of Kabul, to collect impressive amounts of donations for the internally displaced people in Afghanistan. Teresa Koloma Beck, I'm so grateful that you are here, and there's no one in this world whom I could entrust moderating this event like you. Teresa is a well-known sociologist, professor at Helmut Schmidt University in Hamburg. She studied in Paris and Witten and wrote her doctoral thesis in Berlin about the everydayization, like the everyday processes of violence and civil war. And ever since has been an expert on the sociology of violence, working primarily with ethnographic methods. She did research in Angola, in Mozambique, and also in Afghanistan in 2015. Received the Thomas A. Herz Prize for qualitative social research of the German Society for Sociology, and published a plethora of books and articles that I'm not going to mention now. Forthcoming is a book chapter, Divided World, Encountering Frantz Fanon in Kabul, that I'm very much looking forward to read. So thank you so much to all of you for being here and participating in the event. And I would now hand over to you, Teresa, and let's start.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marion, for this very kind introduction. I'm very happy and also feel very honored to be here, because the questions that will be raised on this panel, how to talk about violence, how to show violence, is something that has been of importance in my own work for many years. So questions like how to convey the reality, the social reality of war and violence to people who are very remote from these situations, who don't feel personally connected to them, who feel spectators to these instances. But also, what does it mean? What do these depictions of violence, of war, of suffering do to the people who are in these pictures, who are living in these situations, which for me then meant to the people who had opened their homes and also frequently their minds, their hearts and souls, to me in research. And finally then also the question, how does showing war, showing violence to particular audience actually affects the dynamics of conflicts itself? So it is also a kind of an interference in a conflict in a particular way. So there are aesthetic, political, and also very personal questions at stake here, and I'm very much looking forward to explore these questions and dimensions this evening with these panelists. The location, Marion will have already said it's not random. The panel is related to this exhibition, which is can still be seen, I think, until Sunday in the room opposite of this one. An exhibition, Yolobi, I Saw It, showing the 4 print cycles entitled The Disasters of War by the Spanish painter and printmaker Francisco de GOYA. These prints are quite well known. It's an oeuvre that captures the horrors of the Napoleonic Wars in Spain and also of the aftermath of this period. And Goya's approach to the question that we ask here today, the question how to visually deal with war and violence, his approach is a very graphic one. So most of you will already know this. So the prints actually show the violence in detail. And it's not by chance that these prints were never published while he was living. They were published some 35 years after his death. So, and of course, such explicit imaginary continues to play a role when we think about these questions, but there are also other approaches. And if we would be able to see Amina's movie right now, which is unfortunately technically impossible, we would actually see a different approach to the things. And I thought maybe I just at least try to give you an idea what you would see if you would now watch the movie. The title of the movie is I Was There, and it was announced, the movie was announced to me as a piece of art that somehow captures particular aspects of the Syrian war, especially prisons and torture prisons. And I came to this, with an expectation to find something which somehow resonates with what Goya did. But then one sees something completely different. We actually, for 20 minutes, follow 3 women who are sitting in, it looks like a living room space, each one individually. And they just talk about their experiences in a very concentrated way. They are, one can see, what I found amazing is to see how they related to the experiences they were telling in very different ways. So one is very touched and moved and by what she is actually telling, by the stories she is telling, and she appears to be very vulnerable. And the other one is, has a much more distanced view, or she appears to be more distanced to the events. Sometimes there's even something like a smile on her face, which is in itself also in a way irritating. And then there is a third person who has a kind of an expert perspective, who almost seems to talk in a kind of professional capacity. And in between, we interspersed, there are sequences of music and strange, how to say, first a bit irritating camera, what is the word? Kamerafahrt. Camera movements. I think at first through a somewhat bizarre space, and later we understand it's close-up of artworks made from clay that one of the women is doing, and also using as a way to somehow work through her experience, through her experiences. And we also see interspersed in between these interview passages comic-like scenes, which always have a figure at the center, which is the imprisoned woman, but in a very abstract way, and we don't see anything graphic. What is actually shown to us are these feelings of being captured, being in an enclosed space, being in an insecure position, listening to things, not really understanding what will happen next. And what I found interesting in the movie, how in this collage of interview passages and then also imagery, we don't see anything graphic, but the way the story is told, it really gets to you in a very physical way. So at least for people who are perceptive towards these things, I have the feeling you feel it, you can almost feel it in your body when they talk about the tightness of the spaces, about the insecurities, not knowing what the guard will do next, but without any graphic imagery. And this is I found it very interesting also in the horizon of the things that Mariam mentioned. And maybe, although we haven't seen the movie, I guess you have all seen it. With this in mind, we can start into some reflection on what showing or not showing the graphics, the graphic imagery of war, what it means in your own work. And you come to this, Marion explained it already, from different perspectives. So in my understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think Omar and also Aisha, you come more from the activist side, where it might be useful in certain instances to play this card, or difficult. I don't know, you will let us know. And then Limu and also Amina, you're also looking with the artist's eye, of course, on these questions. But maybe we start with the activist perspective, Omar. What are your thoughts on this? And we share it.
Hi everyone, it's good to be here. I'm going to start with giving a brief information, an overview of the situation in Afghanistan, and then, because our discussion and panel is kind of rooted in how we are struggling to show what's happening in Afghanistan in the forms we do today. After the collapse of the former government in Afghanistan, all the hard-won achievements, especially for women in Afghanistan, were gone. Today it has been the 409th day since millions of women and girls were banned from secondary and high schools in Afghanistan. Women are banned working in most places across the country. They cannot travel without the money. They're not allowed to go abroad without the money. So, showing this image and picture to the world in order to get solidarity, attention, and their collective response to this situation, it's quite challenging, because usually solidarity is, for me, are formed between countries. It's interconnected in forms of socially, culturally, historically, geographically, and then how it aligns with the international politics. And kind of forming these attentions and solidarity isn't easy for a country like Afghanistan, which has been in conflict and war for nearly 4 decades. That means 2 generations in the world has been used to listening to the same war stories, tragic stories from Afghanistan, or somehow the international media, how they portrayed it, they have shaped the perception of people about Afghanistan. When I first came to Germany, most of the time my first interaction with a stranger would be like when they find out where I come from, the moment they know Afghanistan, I would feel that they already have an idea about what my country is about. It's war, it's violence against women, it's terrorism, it's bombast. The reaction is more like a sympathy or like, oh, I'm sorry. So changing this generational and decades-old perception of people and getting their solidarity and attention about what's happening in Afghanistan is quite difficult because it has become quite repetitive. In this side of the world, they're far away from there. They are strange to that culture. On the other side of the world, usually solidarities and attentions from people from the same religion, same culture, and socially are basically formed by who oppresses people in Afghanistan, how the oppression happens. Is it by the people from the same religion, from the same mindset? And it's okay. If the oppression comes from a strange person who is an alien to our race, to our religion, then that's when people get sensitive. To give an example that always bothers me too, like when there is a mandatory school uniform imposed on girls to wear a scarf in France, the entire Muslim world goes crazy. They go on the streets, they protest, they boycott their products, they try to get rid of their diplomatic relations with them. But when the same thing happens by people who identify themselves as Muslims, like Taliban, when they ban women from the entire education or access to work and employment, or kind of erase them from society, the same people do not show any reaction. So I get into this point that in order to question and get the attention of people on this side of the world, you've got to expose like a very tragic and heartbreaking situation to them. Because we have witnessed that with a lot of events that happened in the past few years. When the tragic event happened about George Floyd, it wasn't just about George Floyd, it was the years of racism, years of situations that were happening on Black people. Or how the drowning of a Syrian Kurdish kid, Alan Kurdi, kind of like shaped the entire world, and mostly like in Europe, they affected the migration policies. It wasn't that it was the first kid that was drowned, or it wasn't that the situation was that exact day they changed in Syria, or right now we're seeing what happened in Iran with Mahsa Amini. It wasn't the first time of oppression towards women, but we are kind of like, I feel like human mindset is kind of like shaped in a way that we gotta see a tragic moment with details in order to show our solidarity and show our attention to them. There's a famous saying that if a person dies, it's a tragedy, and if hundreds and thousands of people dies, it becomes statistics. So with the case of Afghanistan, it's just that second side for us, because we often have to show something very tragic, and it's not because we want to show that, but because I feel that's kind of like the only situation, the only option left in order to kind of like inform people, get their attention, especially in this time that I see the world, especially the countries that are in crisis right now. I see that there is kind of like a market of competition that which country in crisis could succeed in getting this solidarity and attention and global solidarity and this collective efforts from the world. So that form, even with right now how I work and we are trying to respond to the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan with the organization that I work, normally when I share reports about the tragic situation, about lack of people's access to food, to clean water, to shelter, barely any people read that or show any reaction to it. But then if I send our team, volunteers team, to go get some graphics and footage from hospitals or from somewhere where there's a terrorist attack happening, and then you could see, and when I share with the people, I received a lot of reactions, a lot of responses and solidarities and donations. So basically it's kind of left for now, for a country like Afghanistan that has been in this situation for a long time and has become very normalized and desensitized to most people, because, as I said, they are far away, they are strange to it, and usually their first source of information from Afghanistan are the mainstream media, but they give it to them. So it's very selective, it's very picky, and as we all know, it's most of the time it's that negative news that gets most of that traction, and that's all that people gets as their first perception from Afghanistan from the mainstream media. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us today. I'm glad to be a part of this discussion. So I'm coming from an activist perspective and experience, but at the same time, I have kind of, I would say, a critical view on how the way the conventional activism efforts are carried out and how much they adversely impact the way we want to actually advocate for the cause. For us, for the people who have been born and bred into perpetual crises and conflicts and yet survived, we are thinking that it's our moral obligation to raise awareness about our people and what's happening to our people and to our nations. We have a cause that we stand for, which is justice for ourselves, for our communities, and for the humanity in general. And that's why we are called advocates. And in the pursuit of that justice, we are trying to provide evidence, as Omar mentioned, in order to establish a strong case and argument against the perpetrators. And for that, we use social media and mainstream media in order to not only circulate our message on a larger global scale, but also to visualize what it feels and what it means to live in that part of the world and what people are going through there. And all of that is happening in order to increase attention, in order to get solidarity and potential action possibly. But the fact is that today the floods of information and the abundance of information on the virtual realm, it's, to be honest, it made people more accustomed to these tragedies. And you see that people are going more indifferent towards these disturbing realities, while these disturbing realities, they are increasing more frequently today. And now the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do the demonstration of these tragic, disturbing realities, do they really motivate people to prevent such tragedies from happening in their societies, or to prevent them, or to stand for the cause of justice and for the rights of those people, the victims, thousands of miles away? If not, then what are we lacking? What are we missing? What is the problem? And what should we transform in our methods of advocacy? And I think one of the I felt that we have to we are having these conventional methods of advocacy, posting tragic pictures to social media, but at the same time, it's not clear. It's not delivering the message, conveying the message in a more clear, persistent, or efficient way, I believe. And there is something that should be changed about this whole method. And I think, especially after the Afghanistan crisis, I realized that on individual level, people find it quite distasteful when they see graphic scenes. But the commonality of it becomes quite normal, and it becomes people, they are getting quite accustomed to it quite soon. And we also have to be mindful that on a public level, there are instances where people, the public in general, they become tolerant towards those graphic images and the disturbing reality of people in violence in conflict situations. And that's because people, to be honest, they cannot concentrate or focus on negative, disturbing facts for a long, persistent period of time. And when you look at the normalization of crisis in some parts of the world, like in Afghanistan, there is, I witnessed that, especially it became quite evident during the Ukrainian crisis, when the journalists on the mainstream media, they were referring to the refugee crisis in an extremely shocking way, like it never happened before. They were saying that these are European people. Do you know what that means? They are not common refugees like Afghans, Syrians, or Iraqians, and that made me shocked, but at the same time, it made me realize that how normalized our crises have become, especially in the Middle East and the global South. These normalization of the crisis, it reached to the point where people do not even feel shocked by receiving the news that students were massacred in their classrooms by terrorists. And it's just yet another bad news from Afghanistan, nothing special that could trigger any kind of action or response from the international community. And of course, when people say initially they hear about the news or the news breaks out, and the whole hype and the excitement and the concerns and fears that are surrounding that context, they are paying attention. But as soon as it becomes status quo, they are adapting, they are adjusting, and at some points they are slowly getting used to ignoring it. But the fact is that in order to transform this universalized numbness into an inspiration for action, I think it's quite important to integrate art and narration, communication into human rights advocacy, because when people think of human rights, it's mostly in terms of human rights treaties. It's about human rights lawyers, human rights organizations like Amnesty International. Like, what exactly human rights means in our daily life? What does it look like for people like you and me? And for people to actually feel like it's the crises that are abstract, that are distant, that to feel that they're relevant, to feel that they're human, they have to see it in a form that could be bearable in a long term, that could be digestible, that could be humanized and individual. And for that, I think it's important to in order to move to that stage, I think we are seeing that there is lack of investment in the artistic form of human rights advocacy, especially in places where we face linguistic devastation, I would say. For example, in the crisis situations where people are lacking the ability to really conceptualize, to really define what it means to live in that context, it's important to express that through the means that could be easily conveyed to the public, that could also kind of cross the cultural and linguistic barriers. And I think when we look at the Picasso and GOYA, they are depicting the scenes of war. And I think you might not necessarily know about the Spanish War, but when you look at their sketches, their paintings, it brings some emotions, even if they happened decades ago, even if they happened hundreds of years ago. And it's actually, it means that art, it is conveying the message in a way that it leaves the viewer with the opportunity to explore further the subject, but also to invest in unpacking that message in their own individual vision or perspective or interpretation, and it's quite implicit, I would say. The fact is that human rights became more static by the conventional way of the efforts that are carried out. But I think it also depends on our vision. And for that vision to be awakened and for that vision to be well fed, it is important to invest on artistic ways and forms of human rights advocacy.
Thank you, Marianne, for inviting me, and I'm really honored to be here tonight. And I want to talk about showing of what can be shown from artistic perspective, because I'm an artist, and I just want to say that this is a very important topic to think about for me as Ukrainian artist, and I'm really glad I have an opportunity to do it in this way here too. And first question that I asked myself is what is the goal of showing war crimes or violence? And I personally don't believe that the goal is to shake the audience. I believe it's more as it becomes more in a side effect. And so the question, what is the goal of showing it? Because as Aisha said, and that's also what I'm experiencing, when we see it every day in news, on the media, we start getting used to it, and it opens up the question: are we becoming? Are we starting to perceive it as something normal, or like are we normalizing violence and war crimes, or no? And I agree that art actually can, in its different medias and shapes and forms, can actually break this. It's very weird word to say, but kind of comfort that we are this. How to say? Like when we are getting used to something, and we are like, okay, it's something that we see every day. But art actually can show us this from the different perspectives. For example, as these movies that we couldn't, unfortunately, watch tonight. As it was mentioned, like in made by Teresa to compare it with GOYA's works. It's very two different approaches how we can deal with this information. And I believe that art is very helpful here. And also I want to add that, or to probably ask, no. I don't know where to start, I'm just saying something. So we all have different resources, mental resources, and I'm not talking people that don't relate, or even people from the areas of people who experienced war or not, it doesn't matter. We watching this like every day in the media, and we just sometimes have a lack of resource to process it, and this is okay. But then we have an issue of like, why we should kind of, right? We should kind of watch it, but we are trying to avoid it because we can't mentally. And this is totally fine, and again, as I said, like art can solve this problem. But also I think that this is more important for scholars, artists, researchers of different kinds, like war crimes, violence. These are a field of their attention, but as just for people who are not related to this kind of work, yeah, I believe we can deal with it through the lens of art. And also, once again, about like this feeling of getting used to violence, I don't think we are getting used to it. I think it's important also to mention we are just getting tired. We are just lacking a mental resource to process it, and we need a break. It's not like but maybe, yeah, that's at least what I feel from my experience. So I don't know about others. Because why I'm saying we are not getting actually used to violence, we are just lacking a mental resource, because humanity have been having wars all the history basically, and each time it's terrifying. It's not like, oh, new war, nice, like it's something like that it's a cup of coffee in the morning. No, each time it's terrifying, and that made me think of this thought that we can't kind of get used to it and normalize it. But maybe you have other thoughts, and I would like to hear them. So yeah, and just to sum up, I think that this discomfort of watching explicit, like graphic content, violence content, war crimes content, we need to be resourceful, and when we are choosing to do that, we need to understand the goal why we are doing that. Because, for example, when we are going to the gym, we understand that we need to sweat and it's going to be painful workout, but we have a goal. So again, I started with the question: what is the goal of watching war crimes and torture scenes and everything? And I believe now my speech becomes more structured, and yeah. And I believe that scholars and artists and researchers have its goal to go through it and to invest resource into it, and then maybe implement it into the artworks or papers or activist projects or content, and so other people who have less resource can actually also face with this in a different form and keep the discussion going on. And also it was interesting for me how just by watching they are becoming a part of experience because as in the title or the event mentioned, it shakes the audience, and as Teresa, you mentioned that when you were watching the movie you were like feeling like you were there, and it's also opens up for me an interesting question on how just by watching we can actually be a part of the experience. So yeah, what is the goal? My question: what is the goal of the watching of things, the scenes of war crimes and violence? Is it the questions that we all should ask when we're doing it?
Maybe I mean, welcome on the panel. First, you already know that we didn't have the chance to watch your movie, but I actually tried to at least explain a little bit what we would have seen if we have watched it. But maybe you can give us a little bit of background on this work. What was the motivation, and how does it relate to these questions of showing the what should not be shown or cannot be shown?
Teresa and hello everyone. I'm Amina. I was late, so I'm done already. I'm not sure if we went through the introduction, just very quickly about me. I'm a campaigner and campaign manager, vaccine trainer from Syria, based in Berlin. I'm a graduate of board ethics and politics. I'm currently doing my master's degree in global media and digital cultures. And I work on Syria and Yemen, two difficult conflicts. I started working on Syria around the start of the uprising, and it has a lot of learning by doing. And started working on Yemen 2 years ago, feeling the importance of transforming this knowledge and also lessons learned to other activists, citizen journalists from other contexts. And the film that unfortunately is not, we were not able to screen today, but we have a link, so it's available on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. It's around 23 minutes only. It's a very short documentary that I worked on with my partner, Sam Beiruti, and the film tells the story of two survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in detention in detention centers, the detention centers of the Syrian regime. Both they were detained in different times, but they shared the same stories of the experience of different layers of SGBV, sexual and gender-based violence, and also how they coped, the process, how they were arrested, how they were taken in the car, how they felt that their space was violated, and how they were spoken to, how they felt even the words that were violating their space, their like body, and also even not the torture itself, but the whole process of just winking or looking at them or telling them I'll come back later in the evening or wash your body, I'm coming back to you. All of this was violating their space, and also the fear from the sexual gender-based violence equals it as well. The film is not as tough as it sounds. When you hear it from me, it's very difficult. If I was and like a person hearing this, what I said, I wouldn't be like encouraged to watch the film. But it's the stories, they're lively, they're courageous. There is power in the way they tell the story. We don't include any graphic or graphic details. It's emotional and you can relate to. We all heard about certain stories and we as audience will connect immediately with them and we feel that they will take us actually to this place. And the film is called I Was There, and we will feel. They will describe, they have a very visual memory. We don't have, of course, scenes of prisons or anything, but the way that they describe it, you feel that we were with them, the way that they speak about music and sarcasm, singing, and trying to, in a way to defy the prison guards. Like there's a scene they speak about singing in prison in the evenings, like it's a women detention center, and they're singing in the evening with they have like a plastic pot and they're using it as like a musical instrument. And then when the guards they look hard on the door or of the cell, then they will sing actually silently. And I found that really like amazing, the way this power, this sense of humor in such a horrible place. And so this is what we tried to work on. When we were asked to work on something on SGBV in Syria, it was a report. We were reached out by a small organization that said we want to do something around SGBV and the International Day of the Disappeared. And their idea was doing a report, interview a psychological expert, interview a lawyer, interview someone else. I forgot actually what was the concept. And then I was like, no, we're not doing this. It just, I don't know if this is what people need to hear. My problem with concepts like that it's not victim-centered approach. We don't need experts to tell us about this. We need survivors to tell the narrative. We interviewed a lawyer after all, but she had a very small intervention in the film. And she's a female Syrian lawyer, so we've been trying to be really careful with the narrative and with the ownership, the agency of their stories. So first, this is what I feel that the film was able to do, and I was really scared working on the film. You have no idea how scary it was for me. I was working with 2 survivors. It's a very sensitive topic, and I felt like I was walking in a land of mines. That this is exactly what's learning by doing. There's no correct answer. There is no way to know when they will feel offended or feel disempowered, or if there's something I'm doing wrong. So what we did during the film was full transparency. Like, whenever you feel you're not comfortable, stop us. When there's a question that you don't want to answer, stop us. Filming hours took longer because even for this short film, we needed to stop and delay filming. And there was a lot of things to keep in consideration. And what made me feel I was not comfortable until the moment that one of the survivors who was interviewed in the film, I sent her the final version, and she sent me a voice note on WhatsApp, and she said, "This is the first time that I love my story. I never imagined that there is a way that I will feel empowered." And then I was like, now I can feel that I'm proud of this, and I can show it to others, and we can feel that we did something right. And I was really proud of that because her opinion meant everything to me, much more than any other opinions. We wanted to make sure that in the film we cover all the emotions. As humans, we have full stories. We have fear, we have humor, we have joy, we have anger, we have sadness, and we did not want to this kind of like stories. Syria, sadness, people crying, graphic horror, mass violations. That's true, and this is what the country has been going through for the last 11 years. But we're humans, we're not like full-time sadness employees or something. I went through also like difficult circumstances myself. I lived in an area in Damascus suburbs. My area was besieged, complete blockade. It was constantly bombed and eventually was attacked by chemical weapons. And from my own experience, I can tell you that in the most difficult moments, we found a place to laugh. Maybe it's adrenaline or it's a coping mechanism or everything. But whenever there's a mortar shell will fall and then we're not dead but we're full of dust, we'll laugh about it. There's nothing else to do. And that's a story that we want to tell. The regime is bombing non-violent people and peaceful citizens, and there's no way to do other things but surviving, laughing about it, and then I need to obey my mother and clean the house because she's still a Middle Eastern mom that she wants to make sure that the house is clean all the time, worrying that we will have guests coming over. I don't know. But that's a true story, and this is a story that I want to tell. Like, I can't believe it. She was like really worried about her china. Oh my god, like the corner of the room was bombed with a mortar shell. And I'm like, my mom, you could have been killed. And there is actually another story that there's a fridge, like a huge refrigerator she loved, and there's a sniper shot went directly next to her head to the refrigerator, and she was sad that it went down. And that's a story. I was traumatized for a week. I was like, I could have lost my mom. She was like, I lost my fridge. So that's true. We were not sitting in the corner. We were not crying all the time. We were powerful. We survived, and we keep laughing. It's a method, and we need to tell the word about it. It's actually my next project. I've been collecting stories from survivors everywhere in Syria and hoping to put that in a book. And I need people to push me to work on that because I feel this is the missing elements in stories. Also, I think it's not only about humor, it's also about hope. It's really important that we don't tell audiences that Syria is a wrecked case, it's a hopeless case. Yemen is hopeless, it's a humanitarian crisis, people are starving, it's true, but don't give up on Yemen, don't give up on Syria, on Afghanistan, or Ukraine. There's also always something to do. And that's why we need to tell the other narratives. We need to tell you that we want you to sign this petition. At least it's going to save one life, but we need to tell the audience this because we need to tell the stories to get something accomplished. We need to build the narrative. We need to build a narrative against all the propaganda, disinformation, misinformation. This is already an achievement. It's happening in Syria. It's happening in Yemen. It's happening in Ukraine. Thanks to our friends, the Russians, everywhere. And we need to now I have so many thoughts. We need to honor the stories, build the history, and try to change policies. It's not going to happen. We know from Argentina, we know from Sierra Leone, we know from many other contexts. We did not sleep over the night, and we did not tell one story and say, okay, it's going to change the world. Did not do one interview on media and say it's going to change things. We need to do a lot. And thinking about media now, I remember that today is the 11th anniversary of, it's a long name, the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, and I wanted to remember to honor all the memories and the work of all journalists around the world who have been trying to deliver the truth in horrific and terrible conflicts and in working under dictatorship. So I was seeing all posts over social media today inspired by all these journalists detained, killed, and still intimidated, but they're still the ones who are still in their context, they're still doing the work. One more thing about the graphic content is really important. I totally think that people don't need to see this. I can't see that. It's very traumatizing. and it's horrible. In many incidents, I was in a field hospital and I had to film things like that. I had moments of thinking if that was a good thing or not. Some of the material I filmed, I gave to other activists. They shared on social media, and then like there's a small part of me always thinking about guilt, and thinking that maybe I accidentally violated the dignity of these victims. I actually have also, that made me think about this because I lost my brother and his wife and their son in August 2013, and I did not see the incident. We managed eventually to see them only in coffins because it was very horrific, and I eventually actually was able to see their bodies. Like someone arrived to the scene and he filmed the scene in full and he posted that on YouTube. And then I was able to see how the families of the victims feel it. I felt that I never wanted to watch that. I downloaded the video, kept them because they're, after all, serious evidence on mass atrocities committed by the Syrian regime. But these videos and these evidence, they don't belong to social media, they don't belong to the wider audience. We have enough trauma around the world, we have a lot of crappy things happening, everything is depressing. And this is just beyond our understanding, beyond our ability as humans to deal with. Like, it's like these images or these footages, once they enter your brain, you can't undo it, you can't delete it. But on the other hand, having this on social media, they're being taken down by artificial intelligence, also Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. And that's also not good. But we have certain groups like the Syrian Archive, Yemeni Archive in Syria, Yemen, the Sudanese Archive, and other groups like Bellingcat, Amnesty International. They're trying to keep an archive of these materials, because these materials are very important for legal actions, for future tribunals and trials, but they don't belong to the narrative. We need to honor the memories of the victims. We need to honor the memories of their families, and we need to remember them smiling. Whenever I'm posting photos on social media as a digital storyteller, I always look for photos of people who are smiling, their favorite memories, the memories they're fond of. And today I was writing a story about a journalist who was assassinated in Yemen, and I got a quote from his daughter, and I asked her, she sent me many photos of him, and then I told her, do you have a photo with him? And then she sent me several photos, and I chose a photo when she was a baby, she was smiling, he was smiling, and I was like, this is what I want to show to the world, can I use it? And then I used it. So hopefully this is the narrative that we show to people. Of course, art is another thing. I need to give you back the mic because I already spoke a lot. You need to stop me. But I'm sorry.
I use the mic myself, it makes it a bit difficult. But thanks so much for sharing.